In late November 1970, a woman's body was found in a remote valley near Bergen, Norway. She had no identification, no wallet, no passport, no personal documents. The location was isolated, and there were no witnesses. At first, the case appeared straightforward. Authorities believed her identity would be easy to establish. She was well dressed, she had traveled recently, she had stayed in hotels. In a country with strong records, this usually leads somewhere. But in this case, it did not, because almost everything that could identify her had been deliberately removed. After the body was discovered, investigators believed the case would resolve quickly. Norway had strong population records. Border movements were documented, hotels recorded their guests. A person could not move long without leaving a trail. The woman appeared to have traveled recently. She carried luggage. She had stayed in multiple hotels. This created confidence. Her movement could be traced. Her name would emerge from records. Investigators began working backward. They collected hotel registers. They reviewed travel routes. At first, the information seemed promising. Names appeared, addresses appeared. But the more records they examined, the less they matched each other. Each name led to another dead end. Each address failed to exist. The woman had not used one identity. She had used several, and none of them were real. What initially looked like routine paperwork began to fracture under scrutiny. Instead of narrowing the search, the evidence multiplied it. The case was no longer about finding a name. It was about understanding why no name would hold. As investigators compared the women's records, a pattern began to appear. This was not a random confusion, it was consistent. Nearly every item connected to her identity had been altered or removed. Clothing labels were cut out, manufacturer tags were missing, even everyday items had been stripped of traceable markings. The names she used were not stolen, they were constructed. Each identity was plausible. Each fit the place and time. But none of them connected to a real person. She checked into hotels under different names. She changed them as she moved. Yet the behavior was not careless. It was methodical. There was no single mistake that exposed her. What investigators were seeing was not the absence of a past, but the deliberate shaping of one. This raised a difficult question. If someone removes every marker of who they are, what remains? The investigation had moved beyond identification. It was now confronting intention. Investigators began reconstructing the woman's movements. They mapped where she traveled, where she stayed, when she moved. Hotel records showed dates and locations. Train tickets showed routes. Witnesses remembered brief encounters. On paper, a timeline emerged. But the timeline did not explain her. Each stop confirmed she had been there, but none explained why. Her possessions added more detail, not more clarity. Items were catalogued: clothing, cosmetics, personal effects. Nothing suggested urgency, nothing suggested fear. There were no letters, no photographs, no personal notes. The objects described how she lived, not who she was. As the reconstruction grew more complete, its meaning thinned. Investigators could follow her path, but not her purpose. The case now contained names, dates, and locations, yet none of it formed a life. What they had built was a structure without context. And the more precise it became, the more obvious its limits were. Decades later, the case was reopened. Advances in forensic science promised new answers. DNA analysis was performed, isotope testing was conducted, databases were expanded. These methods could determine where a person had lived, what they had eaten, and where they might have traveled. Investigators hoped this would succeed where earlier efforts had failed. The results did provide new information. They suggested parts of our geographic history. They narrowed possible regions of origin. But the findings did not produce a name. They did not explain her purpose. They did not explain her choices. The science clarified fragments without connecting them. Even with modern tools, her life could not be reconstructed. The technology confirmed something unsettling. The woman had not disappeared because the systems were weak. She had disappeared because they had been successfully avoided. In the end, the case was not unresolved because evidence was missing. It was unresolved because identity was absent. Investigators learned where the woman had been. They learned what she carried. They learned how she moved. But they never learned who she chose to be. The systems designed to record a life were thorough. They simply recorded what was given to them. When names were false and histories were constructed, the records remained accurate but meaningless. The question this case leaves behind is not who she was. It is whether a person can remove themselves so completely that nothing authentic remains. In this case, the answer appears to be yes.